It's actually curly. It's like twisted up. You like
That's
his
a
beard?
choice. I love his beard.
You do?
Yeah. I think he looks handsome either way.
You look like Santa.
Ho, ho, ho.
I'm still...
Micah Plath lying bruised and battered after a fight with his own brother is not the kind of scene viewers expected to see at the close of this season, but that's exactly what played out. One moment the family was caught up in a wedding celebration, the next, chaos erupted. Isaac, the youngest son who many fans once viewed as the quiet observer, ended up at the center of the storm. His actions left Micah injured badly enough that people were seriously questioning how the hospital bills were going to get paid, and then, almost without warning, the family's focus shifted. Instead of looking at the violence between brothers, all eyes turned on Veronica Peters, Micah's girlfriend, and she suddenly found herself being treated as the root of all problems. Now, if that isn't shocking enough, it wasn't just a casual disagreement or a spat that could be brushed off. We're talking about physical consequences, a hospital visit, and talk of plastic surgery for Micah's injuries. The way this family handled the aftermath is where things get really interesting, because rather than facing Isaac's accountability head-on, the energy quickly moved toward blaming Veronica, criticizing her influence, and even questioning whether she should still be welcome in Micah's life at all. In a matter of hours, the attention went from Micah's face and Isaac's fist to Veronica's supposed behavior. That shift tells us more about the Plath family dynamic than any single argument ever could. Hi friends, my name is Sophie, and welcome back to Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. If you love following the real drama behind the polished scenes of reality TV families, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear from you. Do you think the blame really belongs on Veronica here, or is this just another case of the Plath family doing what they've always done, deflecting responsibility and pointing fingers at the outsider? From the very first moment the injury was shown, the stakes were raised. This isn't just about bruised egos, it's about literal bruises and bills. Hospital bills don't magically disappear, and for a family that's been shown to wrestle with control over money, parenting and independence, watching them argue over how Micah's medical costs should be handled only made the drama sharper. The irony is hard to miss. Here are siblings who grew up with a strict upbringing, limited access to the outside world, barely any TV or internet, and now the fallout of that environment is playing out on camera for all of us to see. Think about it. Isaac, who has often been portrayed as the obedient younger brother, suddenly lashes out in a way that nobody could excuse. Micah ends up in the hospital, and instead of anyone pausing to reflect on how years of bottled-up control and suppressed emotions might have led here, the Plath reflex kicks in. Who else can we blame? Who else can we hold responsible so we don't have to admit that one of our own has crossed a line? And that's where Veronica steps into the spotlight, whether she wanted to or not. Viewers watched as Veronica was pulled into conversations that were supposed to be about bills and recovery. Instead, those sit-downs turned into interrogations, with the family suggesting she was unpleasant, too critical, and a bad influence. She was confronted with accusations that she insulted other family members and made things worse. And while Veronica isn't perfect, her words have stung, her attitude has rubbed people the wrong way, it's impossible to miss how quickly the narrative shifted away from Isaac's choices. The core issue, brother striking brother, was almost swept aside. This is what makes the season finale so compelling. We're not just seeing one fight, one hospital visit, or one girlfriend getting told she's not welcome. We're watching a pattern that has repeated over and over in this family. When things get ugly, when accountability would be too painful, the Plaths have a way of circling the wagons, shielding their own, and setting the outsider on fire. It's not new. Olivia has lived it, Mariah has lived it, Ethan has fought against it. And now Veronica is learning firsthand what it feels like when the family bond transforms into a weapon. So here's the question that we'll keep coming back to throughout this breakdown. Was Veronica truly the problem, or did she just happen to be standing in the room when a family already on edge needed someone to blame? That question matters because it determines whether we see this moment as the rightful exit of a toxic figure, or as yet another example of a family covering for its own by throwing someone else under the bus. And as always with Welcome to Plathville, the truth is tangled up in emotion, loyalty, and years of complicated history. The wedding should have been a moment of celebration, a bright spot for the Plath family after years of very public fractures. Instead, it became the backdrop for one of the most uncomfortable and explosive scenes we've seen yet. From the very start of the festivities, there was tension in the air. Weddings in most families can already be stressful, mixing relatives, old grudges and heightened emotions, but in this family where loyalty and control have always been at the center, it was almost a recipe for disaster. You could see it in the way people spoke to each other, short comments that carried more weight than they should, and awkward silences when certain names came up. Isaac in particular seemed to be on edge. He's the youngest of the Plath brothers, and for a long time he played the role of the quiet sibling, the one who followed rules, avoided conflict, and mostly stayed in the background while Ethan, Mariah, and Micah clashed with Kim and Barry. But at the wedding, it was different. Isaac's posture, his comments, even the way he carried himself showed that he wasn't just the quiet younger brother anymore. He had grown into someone who had opinions, who was ready to call people out, and who unfortunately sometimes took that too far. There's another element we can't ignore, and that's the presence of alcohol. The Plaths have a complicated history with drinking, considering their extremely conservative and restrictive upbringing. For years, viewers watched as the kids, once out of their parents' shadow, experimented with choices that were once off limits. Alcohol is one of those choices, and in this case, it didn't just loosen people up, it fueled already fragile tempers. Allegedly, all the brothers were drinking that night, and if you've ever seen how alcohol can mix with family tension, you know that it doesn't take much for emotions to boil over. That's exactly what happened here. What should have been laughter and toasts turned into raised voices, pointed comments, and finally, a physical fight. Isaac's outburst didn't come from nowhere though. If you look back at earlier seasons, you can see hints of him slowly stepping into a role that looked an awful lot like Ethan's in the past. Ethan has been known for being stubborn, quick to push back when he feels challenged, and absolutely unwilling to compromise if he believes he's in the right. Over time, Isaac started showing those same patterns. He began to nitpick at anything that didn't fit his worldview, correcting people, arguing small points, and holding tight to a belief system that left no room for nuance. It's like he internalized the black and white thinking he grew up with, and turned it outward. That's part of why the fight with Micah was so shocking but also so telling. Micah has been one of the siblings most willing to adapt to the outside world. He's built a career in modeling, embraced a more social lifestyle, and tried to create space away from the strict rules of the Plath household. For Isaac, watching his brother live freely may have stirred feelings of judgment, jealousy, or even betrayal. In Isaac's eyes, Micah's choices and the people around him, Veronica included, didn't align with what he thought was acceptable. That simmering judgment finally came to the surface at the wedding. And then there's Veronica. Viewers saw how her presence at the event became a lightning rod for criticism. Veronica wasn't just another guest, she was Micah's girlfriend, and in a family where outsiders often become the scapegoats, that role comes with a target on your back. From the beginning, Veronica and the Plath family never fully clicked. She's outspoken, she has no problem calling people out, and she doesn't always sugarcoat her words. Some of the things she said during the season, especially about certain family members, were sharp enough to leave scars. For a family that thrives on protecting its image, that was unforgivable. During the build-up to the fight, Veronica's words hung heavy. She made remarks that the family took as disrespectful, and Isaac, already wound up, saw it as his responsibility to push back. What's striking is how quickly those comments were inflated into something larger than they were. In an environment already thick with alcohol and family pressure, her presence and her attitude were painted as the spark that ignited the explosion. But here's the thing, Veronica may have said things that were unkind, she may have been blunt, but words don't force someone to throw a punch. Isaac's decision to lash out physically was his own, and no amount of finger-pointing can erase that. Still, in the eyes of the Plaths, Veronica became the perfect villain. Micah's injuries were real, Isaac's role undeniable, but the family's instinct was to deflect. To them, Veronica wasn't just a girlfriend, they framed her as the reason behind the fight, the wedge driving the brothers apart, the outsider who disrupted their world. It's almost textbook Plath behavior. When things go wrong, the person who isn't fully one of them takes the fall. So as the dust settled from the wedding, with Micah nursing injuries and Isaac under a cloud of blame, Veronica found herself pulled into the storm. The conversations that followed weren't just about healing or accountability, they were about reassigning fault. That's why by the time we reached the sit-down scenes later on, it wasn't Isaac's actions on trial, it was Veronica's character, her comments, her place in Micah's life. What's fascinating about this buildup is how predictable it almost was. If you followed Welcome to Plathville from the beginning, you know the cycle: strict upbringing, kids pushing boundaries, conflict exploding, and then a scramble to decide who the scapegoat will be. This time the cycle just happened to land on Veronica. And watching it unfold at what should have been a joyful wedding only made it more painful to see. When the dust of the wedding night fight finally settled, reality came crashing in hard and fast, and not in the kind of way the Plaths could sweep under the rug. Micah's injuries weren't just bruised egos or harsh words that could be papered over with time, they were physical, visible, and expensive. The whispers from the family table turned into hushed conversations about hospital bills. Suddenly, the playful bravado of brothers drinking together had spiraled into a medical crisis that could cost thousands. And here's the question hanging over everything: who's going to pay? Micah's nose was busted, his face visibly swollen, and fans couldn't help but notice in the preview clips that something looked off. Whether you want to call it botched, broken, or in need of a plastic surgeon, the reality is that fixing an injury like that isn't cheap. We're talking hospital visits, x-rays, possible surgery, and follow-up care, tens of thousands of dollars if insurance doesn't cover it. Someone in the Plath family even joked that Isaac better start collecting peanuts to help foot the bill, a jab at his job and at the absurdity of a teenager being financially responsible for a grown man's injuries. But underneath the humor was a painful truth: Micah's accident had financial strings attached, and they were pulling the family apart. That's where the infamous kitchen table showdown comes in. Veronica, the woman already under suspicion by the Plaths, found herself sitting across from Kim at the family's original home. On the surface, it looked like they were simply crunching numbers, trying to figure out how Micah's bills were going to be handled. But in reality, this was a setup, one of those classic reality TV ambushes, where the topic at hand was only a cover for the real confrontation. Kim, ever the strategist, didn't invite Veronica over just to talk logistics. She invited her because the family had already decided it was time to cut her out. But Veronica didn't know that. She thought she was there to advocate for Micah, to make sense of the chaos, to deal with the very real fallout of Isaac's actions. So there she was, laying out receipts, stressing about medical costs, while the Plaths were quietly preparing to light the fuse on a different kind of bomb. And in the middle of all this tension was Micah himself. Fans noticed something striking about his demeanor. You'd expect anger, resentment, maybe even hatred toward the little brother who put him in the hospital. But Micah didn't look furious. He didn't carry himself like a man out for revenge. Instead, his body language read almost like surrender, or even yearning. When Isaac walked into the room, Micah looked at him not with clenched fists, but with a kind of longing, like he wanted to just pull him into a hug, to erase what had happened. It was a heartbreaking contradiction. Here was a man nursing a broken face, staring at the brother who caused it, and instead of fire, there was this silent plea for peace. But Veronica wasn't about to let it slide. If Micah wouldn't speak up for himself, she would. She tore into Isaac, calling him a disgusting human being, and demanding to know how he could do something so brutal to his own blood. Her words were sharp, pointed, and impossible to ignore. And unlike Micah's forgiving glances, her tone was icy with rage. She didn't just criticize Isaac's behavior, she mocked him, saying he'd better start saving every dime if he expected to cover hospital costs. That jab cut deep, not only because it ridiculed Isaac but because it highlighted the absurdity of the situation. A family fight had escalated to a point where hospital debt was on the table. Of course, fans saw the duality immediately. On one side you had Veronica playing the role of the outspoken truth-teller, unafraid to put Isaac on blast. On the other, you had Micah, visibly hurt, physically scarred, yet silently reaching out with his eyes for reconciliation. And right behind them, you had Kim, calculating, steering the conversation not toward accountability for Isaac, but toward the quiet dismantling of Veronica's place in the family. It's almost Shakespearean in its layers: betrayal, loyalty, and the endless cycle of scapegoating that defines this family. Because while Veronica's words may have been cutting, while her anger may have been loud, the underlying reality is this: Isaac hit Micah. That choice was his. That damage was his to own. But instead of putting Isaac on trial, the family, as always, pivoted. They made the outsider, the girlfriend, the non-Plath, the villain of the story. And fans are not buying it. Social media lit up after the sneak peek aired, with viewers calling the scene heartbreaking and twisted. One fan wrote, "I can't believe Micah looked at Isaac with forgiveness while everyone else ganged up on Veronica. It's backwards." Another pointed out that it was unfair to discuss finances with Veronica in the first place. Why is Micah not handling his own bills? Why drag her into it? That's what makes this fallout so heavy. It's not just about money, or injuries, or even the fight itself. It's about the way this family processes pain. Instead of facing the raw truth that one brother put another in the hospital, they deflect, they scapegoat, and they redirect the narrative onto someone who doesn't have the protection of their last name. In the end, Micah's face will heal. The bills will get paid one way or another. But the emotional scars, Veronica's rejection, Isaac's violence, Micah's quiet longing for peace, those will linger long after the cameras stop rolling. And for fans, watching siblings unravel like this is more than just reality TV. It's a tragedy, one that exposes how deeply fractured this family really is. If the hospital bills and Micah's visible injuries weren't enough to put the Plaths under a microscope, what came next solidified the finale as one of the most gut-punching moments this family has ever delivered. Picture it. Veronica walks into the Plath family's original home, thinking she's been called over to have a straightforward, if awkward, talk about Micah's hospital costs. She probably braced herself for a little financial tension, maybe some guilt tripping, but nothing she couldn't handle. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, is that the entire meeting was a staged ambush. And at the center of it all, Kim Plath quietly pulling the strings. Kim framed the sit-down as practical housekeeping. The bills had to be addressed, money had to be accounted for, Micah's face wasn't going to fix itself, and it was time for adults to make some decisions. That was the cover story. But behind the curtain, this wasn't about money at all. This was about cleaning house, shifting blame, and removing a woman who had become inconvenient. It was the classic Plath maneuver presented as concern, staged as accountability, but in reality orchestrate a takedown. And let's not pretend production didn't know exactly what they were doing here. This is reality TV 101. You don't lure someone into a confrontation unless you know you're about to capture fire on camera. Veronica wouldn't have shown up if she knew what the meeting was really about. She wouldn't have walked into that kitchen if the truth had been spelled out. So production dangled the safe bait. Come talk bills. Come figure out the next steps. But the trap was already set. The moment she walked through that door, the spotlight was no longer on Micah's medical debt. It was on her. The accusations came sharp and fast. Veronica had bashed the family. She was unpleasant to be around. She had supposedly sparked the fight between Micah and Isaac with her nasty comments, her sarcasm, her refusal to play nice. Suddenly, the young woman who had spent weeks at Micah's side was being painted as the virus infecting the household. All of Micah's bruises, all of Isaac's rage, all of the chaos of that night, none of it belonged to the boys anymore. It was all Veronica's fault. The irony here is staggering. Isaac threw the punch. Isaac made the choice. But when the Plath family circle tightened, Isaac wasn't the one under fire. Veronica was. They turned her into the lightning rod, the scapegoat, the outsider who could absorb all the ugliness so the family didn't have to look in the mirror. And Kim, poised and deliberate, allowed it to unfold exactly as planned. For Veronica, the realization must have landed like a gut punch. She sat down thinking she was there to talk about hospital bills, to argue over dollars and cents, to maybe even defend Micah from shouldering the entire cost. But as the conversation twisted, she realized she hadn't been invited to problem solve. She had been invited to be eliminated. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an execution. Her face said it all. At first, there was disbelief. Surely this couldn't be what it looked like. Then the defensiveness kicked in, lashing back, pointing out Isaac's own behavior, reminding them that she didn't swing the punch. And finally the dawning truth, she wasn't going to win. The Plaths had already decided. This wasn't about fairness, it was about loyalty. And in that equation, Veronica was disposable. Fans watching the preview could feel the weight of betrayal in the air. This wasn't accountability, it was staged accountability. The family wasn't holding Isaac responsible, they weren't holding themselves responsible, they were closing ranks. And when the Plaths close ranks, it's always the outsider who pays the price. Olivia knows it. Mariah knows it. Ethan knows it. And now Veronica knows it too. The emotional weight of that moment can't be overstated. Veronica wasn't just blindsided. She was cornered. It was her against the family machine, with Kim steering the narrative and Isaac slipping conveniently into the background. Even Micah, the man she'd been closest to, didn't come charging to her defense. His silence, his longing for peace with his brother, left Veronica exposed. She was fighting alone, and maybe that's what made it so devastating for viewers. Because deep down, everyone could see what was really happening. The Plaths weren't seeking truth. They were protecting their own. They were rewriting the story in real time, turning a violent brother into a victim, and turning a girlfriend into the villain. It was betrayal. Plain and simple. But it was betrayal wrapped in that uniquely Plath style, polite words, steady gazes, and a refusal to admit fault within the family circle. When Veronica finally walked out of that house, fans could almost hear the echo of the door slamming shut. Not just physically, but emotionally. She wasn't just leaving a conversation, she was being erased from Micah's world, cut out of the Plath orbit, marked as the problem so the real problems could stay hidden. And that's what makes this moment more than just reality TV drama. It's a case study in family loyalty overriding truth. It's about how people will twist, bend, and even destroy relationships to keep their carefully constructed image intact. For the Plaths, image has always been currency. And in this finale, Veronica became the sacrifice they were willing to make to preserve it. So let's strip it all down to the core. Isaac hit Micah. That was his decision. Nobody forced his hand. Nobody made him swing. Veronica didn't lift a finger. She didn't throw a punch. She didn't knock Micah into a hospital bed. Isaac did. And yet, in the Plath universe, that truth gets pushed to the background, while the spotlight gets shoved onto the outsider. It's the same tired pattern we've watched unfold season after season. When the family messes up, they scramble to find someone on the perimeter to blame. And let's be honest, scapegoating Veronica is almost convenient for them. She's not tied by blood, she doesn't carry the Plath last name. She can be tossed aside without disturbing the perfect family image they still try to cling to. It's harsh, but it's easier for them to point fingers outward than to turn inward and ask why one brother's anger boiled over into violence against another. But that's exactly where the accountability should be. Isaac is old enough to know that throwing a punch has consequences. The fact that his actions left Micah with hospital bills and a broken nose should have been the wake-up call for the entire family. Instead, we watched them wrap him in protection, shielding him from the responsibility he clearly earned. And the irony? That protection doesn't help him grow. It keeps him stuck, just like it's kept so many of the Plath kids stuck in these endless cycles of blame and pain. This moment didn't happen in a vacuum. If you followed Welcome to Plathville from the beginning, you already know the roots run deep. Kim and Barry raised their kids in extreme isolation, sheltered from music, television, friendships outside their bubble, even the simple freedom of making mistakes in the real world. And when you keep children locked away from experiences, when you deny them the tools to process emotions in healthy ways, you shouldn't be shocked when anger explodes in ugly directions. Isaac isn't a monster. He's a product of that environment, a kid who never learned how to deal with stress or conflict without going on the attack. We've seen echoes of this before. Look at Ethan. For years he's been the poster child of bottled-up rage. His marriage to Olivia cracked under the weight of his unresolved childhood, his inability to communicate without shutting down or lashing out. Or look at Mariah, who bolted as far as she could from her parents' control, only to wrestle with her own anger, her identity, her relationships falling apart because she never had space to figure them out in a safe way. This family's story is a trail of broken connections, each one tied back to that rigid, suffocating upbringing. And then there's Olivia. If anyone knows the cost of being cast as the outsider, it's her. For years she was painted as the disruptive force, the one tearing the family apart. But what was she really doing? Pushing for honesty, pointing out cracks that already existed, demanding autonomy. Just like Veronica now, she became the lightning rod for the Plath's unwillingness to take accountability. They didn't want to face their own dysfunction, so they branded her the problem. Sound familiar? That's why fans watching this finale felt such a mix of heartbreak and déjà vu. On one hand, you feel for Micah, nobody deserves to get hurt by their own sibling. On the other, you can't ignore the pattern. The family circles the wagons, labels an outsider as the villain, and moves on like nothing happened. It's a cycle that leaves wounds unhealed and younger siblings like Isaac carrying destructive habits into adulthood. And honestly, here's where the empathy sneaks in. Isaac is still young. He's impressionable. He's trying to find his place in a world he wasn't prepared for. But instead of being guided toward real accountability, he's being shielded. Instead of being told, "You crossed a line, and this is on you," he's being told, "Don't worry, we'll redirect the fire onto Veronica." That doesn't help him. It sets him up for more explosions down the road. It's painful because you want better for these kids. You want them to break free from the script their parents wrote for them. But as long as the family keeps rewriting history, as long as they keep deflecting blame onto the easiest target, that growth doesn't happen. Veronica becomes the latest casualty in a long list that includes Olivia, includes Mariah, even includes Ethan in his own way. The Plaths would rather sacrifice relationships than admit their own role in creating the mess. And maybe that's the saddest part, because what started as a fight between two brothers could have been a real chance for healing. It could have been the wake-up call, the family moment where they finally said, "This is the result of our choices, our control, our mistakes." Instead, it turned into another performance of loyalty and image, another chapter in the ongoing saga of accountability versus deflection. So when viewers ask, was Veronica really the problem? The answer is clear. No, she wasn't. She was a mirror the Plaths didn't want to look into. So they smashed it. And just like every broken mirror before, the cracks say more about the people holding the hammer than the reflection itself. As all of this chaos unfolded, there's one piece that still stings for me, and probably for a lot of viewers who've been rooting for her since day one: Lydia. This was supposed to be her moment. The wedding, the celebration, her chance to step out of the background and finally get a little joy without drama swirling around her. But did she get that spotlight? No, it was swallowed whole by the brawl between Micah and Isaac and the fallout that landed Veronica on the family chopping block. You could almost see the discomfort on Lydia's face when the conversation shifted away from her happiness and onto the brothers' fight. Once again, her story was pushed aside in service of the louder, messier family dynamics. And that's where the heartbreak cuts deep. Lydia has always been the peacemaker, the one trying to hold threads together when everything else frays. But peacekeepers often pay the price. They lose their voice while chaos gets center stage. Watching her wedding joy be overshadowed by this mess is another reminder of how the Plath family has a habit of letting conflict steal the light from moments that should be celebrated. Now looking at the siblings, you have to wonder, where do they even go from here? Can Micah and Isaac heal from this, or did that punch mark the beginning of a permanent fracture? On the surface you could tell Micah wanted to forgive. His body language during those tense conversations didn't scream revenge, it screamed exhaustion. Like he wanted to reach across the distance and say, "You're my brother, and I don't want this between us." But forgiveness only works when the person at fault accepts responsibility. And as we've already seen, the Plath family isn't exactly eager to let Isaac carry the weight of what he did. Without that, Micah's hope for reconciliation could end up hanging in the balance. Then there's Veronica. Her exit changes things not just for her, but for Micah's image in the eyes of fans. For months people have seen Micah as the more independent sibling, carving out a life in Mutlin, and trying to distance himself from the family's rigid rules. Being with Veronica seemed like part of that freedom, his way of choosing his own path. But now, with her pushed out and blamed for problems she didn't create, it leaves fans questioning how much agency Micah really has. Did he stand by her, or did he allow his family's narrative to erase her from his life? That's going to shape how people see him going forward, because when you're tied to a family like the Plaths, silence can look a lot like complicity. And that's the question hanging in the air, isn't it? Can this family ever stop deflecting? Ever stop blaming outsiders long enough to face the mess within their own walls? Or will this just keep repeating? Outsiders come in, get tangled in the chaos, and when things blow up, they're shown the door while the family closes ranks. It's a cycle we've seen before, and unless someone inside finally breaks it, we're destined to watch the same story play out again and again. But maybe you see it differently. Maybe you think Veronica really did add fuel to the fire. Or maybe you believe Isaac deserves more grace, given how he was raised and the environment he's still trying to navigate. I want to hear what you think. Do you believe Micah and Isaac can repair their bond? Do you think the family was justified in asking Veronica to leave? Or is this just another chapter in the Plath's long history of pushing blame onto anyone but themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and your takes always spark the best conversations. And before you go, make sure to hit subscribe to stay locked in with me, Safi, here at Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. We've got more breakdowns of Welcome to Plathville coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next one. Because if history tells us anything, this family's drama is far from over.